All right, we're being joined by Dr. Adi now to look at the options available to finance Nigeria's infrastructure. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Adi.
Good morning, Chimeze. Thank you for having me.
So, evidently, the government, at all levels, cannot adequately finance infrastructure in the country. It has then become imperative to seek alternative sources of financing. Let's begin with what appears to be a default financing option, which is borrowing. What's your view on borrowing to fund infrastructure, and what are the other available options?
Oh, okay. Borrowing as a way, one of the options to funding or financing infrastructure. Let's say funding infrastructure, not financing, because when we talk about financing, we're looking at market-based approach. Borrowing is not approach, especially when it is a public borrowing. So that is a kind of a borrow funding where government wants to determine what happens and which infrastructure in which regions in which sector gets to be done. So I think that is what determines and defines their borrowing behavior. Because government wants to be really in control of dictating where the funds go. Otherwise, it is not quite justifiable. It's not really economically rational, especially when we have known that government has competing needs in many areas, in social infrastructure, for instance. So perhaps physical infrastructure, we're talking about the roads, the bridges, the ports, the airports. These are market in generating or market sensitive infrastructure in the sense that they really can be commercialized. So government doesn't really need to borrow funds, to do that. The private market should be incentivized to provide it. But when it comes to social infrastructure, where it is kind of difficult to really make the market case, the business case, let's say school education, where because it has positive externality, the market is not really suitable to provide such. So the externality, the market failure you have in social infrastructure seems to outweigh that is obtainable in physical infrastructure. As such, government should concentrate in provision or funding all those ones. But when it comes to the hard physical infrastructure, I think government's role should be to incentivize private provision.
All right, Dr. Adi, let's look at public-private partnership option here. How viable is this option, and what is our track record in the adoption of this model, and do you know of any success stories?
Well, we do not know of any significant success story today. Of course, when you talk about infrastructure, you're talking about billion-dollar size infrastructure, project finance, the ones that will be like have a gearing ratio of say 90-10, minimum of 80-20. I'm talking about the combination of debt and equity. So when you look at that, we've not actually had a significant action or activity on the PPP space, despite all the noise that has been made over the last decade and a half that we've been on the PPP journey. Of course, housing PPP has succeeded. Small, like mortuary PPPs have succeeded. Those are nothing that we need to talk about. But when we talk about, for instance, say Lagos Benin Expressway, okay, if it is going to be PPP, of course we attempted it collapsed. We tried with the port, that is the only PPP that seemed to work. Of course, it's just a PPP of a different vintage. It's just concessions, okay. And then even at that, if you speak to the port operators, they will tell you that government has not been able to live up to its own responsibility. Statutory or contractual obligations have not been met. So when our track record on PPPs is just dismal, and everybody knows that.
Now, as you know, the private sector can only be attracted to invest in areas that are very commercially profitable, but not all the infrastructure are commercially attractive. Is this not a major limitation to PPP?
It's not a matter of, it depends on how, well, we have to look at the framework, okay, that defines roles, responsibilities, obligations, the contractual obligations. So we have to look at that. before you set out on the journey to PPPs or attracting private sector, you have to ensure that you have the empowering or incentivizing institutional environment. If it is not there, there is nothing that the private sector. I mean, we're talking about businesses, okay? Everybody is in business to make profit, and not just to make profit. You need to ensure that when you make that profit or you invest, that your investment is secure. Okay, so in a non-secure environment, now insecurity is not just that we have, the overt conflict, the overt carrying of arms and destruction of properties and all of that. We are talking about the institutional insecurity that we have. Government, Nigeria has been known to be awful when it comes to respect, for contracts. So contracts are supposed to be sacrosanct, but it is not in our own crimes. So that is the biggest incentive to anybody coming to invest. So that is what people are looking out for. And until it's done, it doesn't matter what we do. I don't think that any serious investor, especially when it's about real infrastructure, a PPP, it has, it's capital intensive and it's over the long duration. So it's a long tenure. So if you're talking about that, then we haven't seen much of it. And if you look at our operating environment, if you consider our institutional environment, if you look at especially our institution of law and order, the ability of the courts, to protect contracts and defend that, we do not have a good record.
All right. Oftentimes, the PPP models mean higher prices to the citizens in form of higher tariffs, toll fees, and other user charges. The argument here is that the social costs will be too much for citizens to bear, especially bearing in mind that the poverty situation. For instance, let's look at the electricity tariff. That's actually a good example of the challenges.
Yeah, but yes, of course, when you decide. What are the alternatives? That's a question to ask. So the alternative would be to borrow. It is borrowing, for government to be directly providing infrastructure, and government doesn't have the capacity in terms of expertise. Doesn't also have the real goodwill. There is no strong incentive for the government to manage infrastructure efficiently. So is that then the option? No, it is not. So yes, something has to give. You can't eat your cake and still have it. There is always a price tag. If we go the way of PPPs, yes, PPPs have been known to be, somehow costlier than the other, maybe direct provisioning by the government. But we're talking about expertise here. We're talking about efficiency, and then we are talking about government having to now focus on other essential needs of the public, not using the scarce resources to just be doing infrastructure, whereas the public sector. So yes, it's about as they say, externalizing costs and privatizing profits. But we're kind of it's about the lesser evil. So do we have to deal today with the absence of infrastructure, not having anything, or having to deal with paying a little bit extra, but then the service is available? So that is the decision that we need to make. But I don't think that is actually the issue, because if you look at the options available, we have not even explored everything. Now, I read in the news that Nigeria has appointed asset managers for the infrastructure company that was established last year. Mm-hmm. Okay, that is a step in the right direction. Okay, but I don't think that all these big news. We've appointed fund managers from Netherlands. We have this person and all these big names. They don't make anything. It doesn't matter. Okay, because if it's still the same operating environment, nothing will work. Okay, and I can tell you, we're also talking about government road infrastructure tax credits. Mm-hmm. So they have been given to big corporates, right? Because they ask for it. It's for a duration of 10 years or so. So where they can invest in infrastructure, and then their taxes, they enjoy tax relief, for the same sum over some years. And also government gives them some kind of a lump sum, which is about the NPR plus 2%, as an incentive. Great. But I can tell you that is just for the corporate. It's just starting. But individuals in Nigeria following the principle of fiscal subsidiarity, which I think that government needs to be looking into. You notice that people, you live in an estate, you provide your own roads. People pay before you move into an estate, you build a house, they require you mandatorily to pay a certain sum, sometimes 200,000, sometimes 500,000 or more. People pay for the estates in which they live, and the estates are able to do the roads. In most cases, also buy transformers and put the power lines. You see, and then we go back line, the history line in Nigeria, the history line, in the early 80s. Okay, if you grew up in the Southeast, especially Imo State, the old Imo State, I can tell you this for certain. They all contributed. I was in primary school, and we paid the little token, 50 kobo, 20 kobo, for the building of Imo Airport. And don't forget, that was just less than a decade or so after the Civil War. People were in penury. It was massive poverty, but people were able to tax themselves to build such. Now, what I'm saying is that there is an option that has not been explored, which is getting the private citizens to be involved. Now you are giving tax relief to corporate. That's great. Can we also think of how to give tax relief to taxpayers, individual citizens, those who use their money, their little salaries to build the roads within the estate in which they live, and those who use their little incomes to build airports? Okay, so we can actually activate more activity. We can actually incentivize more people, individual citizens, if no matter how small it is. But when you now think about the pool, that's volume of funds that can be used to build this infrastructure, like airport, as it happened in Imo State and some other states in the south. In Nigeria, yes.
Sure, Dr. Adi, yes, talking about this tax credit, I mean, one would wonder how the tax credit is valued, because I think that's another challenge when you talk about the tax credit, the valuation, to make sure that the tax credit is not in excess of the project value. How can it apply in other critical infrastructure, yeah?
Yeah, so again, if let's think about this way. If I were a corporate and I'm interested in building the road that I will build is the one that has something to do with my business. I mean, maybe the linking road to my factory, or the one that connects me to the port for the evacuation of my goods. Okay, that is the one I'll be interested in. So, which means the other roads that I have nothing to do with will not be serviced, will not be done. So you see, that is the limitation of corporate tax relief as a way to fund infrastructure. So it is only on those areas, but that's good. I mean, half bread is better than none. So that's good in itself. You're talking about the burden of this. Wouldn't it be higher than the project, and wouldn't it be much, a huge, deadweight loss on the side of the public? Like I said earlier, what options do we have? Government has proved itself, especially in Nigeria. Government has failed over the years when it comes to provision of the needs, the infrastructure needs of the citizens. Okay, if the corporate sector, because you understand, they have the efficiency, they have the rational incentive, to drive it from end to end. So I think we can give it to them and then deal with the cost. Otherwise, we will continue to have this borrowing. But I like what is going on with the infrastructure fund, okay, the infrastructure company. Government has put in about 2.7 billion or thereabout, about a trillion naira. Then the infrastructure fund is supposed to build it up, raise capital of 15 trillion over the next few years. We have huge infrastructure need. Right? So we have to explore all the options. That of corporate tax relief, yes, even though in the future it may be higher, but then it doesn't matter. We have to look at the valuation of the infrastructure that is to be delivered today. So I think the net benefit, when we look at the net benefit, it should outweigh whatever the future cost will be.
Okay. All right, Dr. Adi, thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there now. Dr. Bongo Adi is a senior lecturer at Lagos Business School. Thank you for your time on Business Morning.
Thank you very much.